It's 4:30 in the morning. It's gonna take me a second to adjust to this light, so I'm gonna keep my eyes like off to the side. But today I'm running the Atlanta Marathon, the 6th marathon for the year. And my motto for the 50 States Marathon Challenge is this: the marathon is the training. How are you training for this? How are you practicing? How are you equipping yourself during the week? The marathon is the training. Every single week I'm running a marathon in a different state. Pretty soon here I'll be running 2 marathons back to back, Saturday, Sunday, and flights and everything in between. I'm still gonna make it happen. The marathon is the training. The practice is the competition, the competition is practice. So why should you live like this, right? Why should you treat the competition, the actual event itself, or the test, or the obstacle, or whatever it is, the end of all of this training, the culmination, the time when you're supposed to move forward and test your true abilities? Why should you treat that as the training? There's a lot of reasons, right? But to start, it takes away that anxiety that comes along with a big competition in your life, a big decision, the weight of the responsibility of all the training that's led up to this, right? If I'm running a marathon every single week and that's the training, I'm just training for some event in the future, it takes that pressure off me. I'm at the start line and I'm like, all right, we're out here. We're going to put down the best we can today, just like a training day, and walk away, unfazed by the results. If I set a personal record today, like I have for the past 2 weeks now, and I've done, I think, 4 times this year so far, which is quite crazy. Like I started out the year at, I think it was like a 3:44, and I had to take a break for an hour in between mile 18 and mile 20, walking miles and stuff like that. Sorry, that was like a 4:44, but 3:44 of active running. But then I showed up to the Houston Marathon and ran a 3:39. Then I ran like a 3:33 at the Mesa Marathon. And then last week I ran a 3:26 at the Austin Marathon. I'm just showing up for myself. Now in between that, there was a 4:15 at the Miami Marathon and a 3:44 at the Mississippi Marathon, right? So there's the 5 plus the practice, so 6 total for the year, plus today as the 6th official marathon of the year. If I walk away from this with a personal record, then great. It's just another week of training. If I don't walk away with a personal record, that's fine too. It's another week of training. Last week, at the end of the Austin Marathon, I like to challenge myself during these races. So at the end of the Austin Marathon, it's mile 18. I pace myself the whole way so I can sprint for 8 miles at the very end. And I know that's, for a lot of people, that's not a sprint, but for me, that's the most fun part of the race. That's where I get to pass people and start taking souls. So I got an hour left in the race, and I'm like, all right, we're at 0. Let's see how far we can get. 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, just passing people left and right? I'm just cruising. And eventually I make my way up to, 50, 75, 100. It's a great feeling when you pass 100 people at the end of a race. You just start pumping, blood's pumping, you're smiling, you're getting the crowd to work for you. Come on, let's go. And it's awesome. It's a great feeling. Now, I passed 187 people. I'm pretty positive. I got to write it down or go back and try to figure it out, but it was wild, right? Because I didn't have that anxiety. It wasn't like, oh man, I haven't run 26 miles before. No, the marathon is the training, right? You want to make the competition itself the actual training. That way, when you show up on race day, when you show up on test day, when you show up to compete, you're at the top of your game already. You've done this. You've showed yourself several times that you've been able to persevere through this challenge. So walking into this on the actual day that it actually matters is nothing. This is just another day in the office. Another day in paradise, baby. This is another practice run. But like I was saying, at the end of that Austin Marathon, we were going around a hill, or like a turn up to a hill, just like one of the most difficult stretches on the race, because it was, at the very end, everyone's exhausted, right? You could tell, like, you could sense there's just like no energy left in these people. But there's one guy, there's one guy who's just like living it up, and that guy was me. And we were going around that bend, and I probably shouldn't have said this, but I was like, it's just a training run for me, boys. Just a training run. Come on, let's get it. Let's go. And I just thought that was hilarious, right? Because these guys are all, first time ever running a marathon, or like fifth time or whatever. Like, no, dude, like this is another week in the office for me. This is a training run. So you want to live like that. You want to have the difficult part as your daily action. That way when you show up, you can compete at the top of the level with no anxiety, no nervousness, and just be fully excited, fully present to take on the moment. How many years am I going to run in my life and actually be healthy to where I can compete at the highest level? I'm only at the very beginning, right? 3 hours, 26 minutes is nothing. I'll be down at 2:26. Give it 2 years, right? So eventually I'll be one of the fastest, or one of the faster guys on the course, let's say. And, when that day comes, like, all the training leading up to that will be awesome to think back on. It'll be nostalgic to think of like running a 3:26 and all the races that have gone into building up to that spot. But I'll see them all as like the training runs, right? When I'm at that level, I won't look back and be like, oh, those were all the competitions. That was all the training that went into being able to race at the top level. And then when I'm at that level and I've spent 3 to 5 years, or maybe 10, whatever it is, practicing to get to that spot and competing at the highest level, well, that's only a fraction of my life. If I spend 10 years in the sport and then I decide at that point I no longer have time to compete at the highest level, I'm going to do this recreationally, then I get to look back on all those times that I showed up for myself as the placeholders, the mile markers, let's say. Oh, I like that, the mile markers of what allowed me to race at the top level. Okay, that's all that is to say, right? You want to make the event, the actual thing that you'll be tested on, the practice. So why else would you want to do that? Because you want to know that you can actually live up to it. You wouldn't show up, like, let's say you're going to drive across the country. You wouldn't show up on not race day, but like the day that you're going to drive across the country without having oiled your car and, changed the tires and filled up on gas and gotten food and packed the car with everything. Like, there's a lot of things that you would do to prepare for it. So the same is true here, but you probably should know, if you just bought this car off Craigslist, if it could ride 100 miles first. So a couple weeks before you do this cross-country trip, you take it on like a 100-mile road trip or something like that, right? And if you didn't, then who knows, you might start it up and be in the middle of the Nevada desert, driving from LA to New York City, and find yourself on the side of the road without a way to get back to civilization because you didn't test correctly. Okay, so it does make sense. We know this. It makes sense to test the actual thing, but most of the training plans are like 18-mile runs, 22-mile runs. No one's doing a 26-mile run in their training program, but I am. And so then I know, as I'm training every single week for this 50 States Marathon Challenge, that each one is training for the next, that there's no anxiety, there's no fear. I can just be excited and put down the results. But I know that I've done this before. I've shown up for myself 6 times so far this year. I've run a marathon, right? And it's February 25th, February 26th, something like that. So I know walking into the Atlanta Marathon today, there's nothing to be afraid about, right? There's no fear because I've done this. I've shown up for myself. I'm not leaving it up to chance on the actual day where it matters. I've trained for this. And then that mountain of confidence, that's what propels you forward. So on top of that, you want to train like the actual competition distance, or, the test or whatever it is. Let's say you're training for the MCAT, right? Or like the SAT or any of these testing things. Then you want to take practice tests as often as possible. That way you can see which styles of questions you're bad at, right? So then during the marathon, I want to see, what are the patterns? where I need to improve? Well, I usually, find that in the mornings, my stomach isn't the best, right? Okay, if that's the case, then I need to wake up a little bit earlier, get really concise on what foods I can eat before a race that will still fuel me during the race, but won't upset my stomach. That way I can walk around before the race because I've woken up early and get my blood pumping so I can go to the bathroom. Then when I start the race, I know that the food that I've eaten won't upset my stomach while I'm running. So I've got that confidence. I won't have to stop the whole 3 hours or whatever it is. Then on top of that, what areas of the race tend to be difficult for me? Well, I knew that, mile 18, it's always going to be difficult, right? Or not always, but you know what I mean? Like that's where the race actually starts, let's say. So then if that's the case, well, then I'll pace myself up to mile 18. I won't go all out until I'm able to have that confidence. Like today's the day. So then I can stave off like 95%, right? Just hold that the whole race. And then eventually when I get towards the end, that's when I can, drop all that time. So when I'm running, I'm usually doing like let's say like a 3 hour, 35-minute pace. Sorry. So that's what I did at the Austin Marathon, right? I was pacing with the 3:35s. Well, then I get to mile 18 and I drop my pace by a minute per mile. Well, then that's 8 minutes that I can shave off. And sure enough, I went from 3:35 down to 3:26:55. So 3:27. Excuse me. Sorry, that was a storm. All what just happened. I dropped 8 minutes in those last 8 miles, right? And so then I'm able to compete 95%. And then when it really matters, that's when I show up for myself. That's when I start pushing. You see all these people who will, put in 10% or less effort for the months leading up to it. You can't do that, right? You got to go pretty close to full effort, whether you're studying or running or training, whatever it is. But as you get closer, usually people tend to go 120% at that spot, right? And they're like exhausted at that point. So then they're not even putting in 120% of results. They're just trying to put in 120% effort. These are the people that stay awake, which this was me in the past, to study for a test. And the night before the exam, the night before the test, they'll study for like 12 hours. They're putting in 120% effort, right? But they're not going to achieve 120% results because these are things you have to grow. You cannot just, make them pop up overnight, right? So then, basically this, if you're training for a marathon or if you're testing soon here for SAT or MCAT or whatever it is, or if you have a standard type of competition, whether it's you're a lawyer and you're in the courtroom, or you're playing basketball because you're in high school and you're trying to go to the NBA, or I don't know, whatever competition you are facing in your life. Try to set up your life so that you have more iterations of the competition itself at full speed, at a full effort. So if you play basketball, well then show up every weekend, maybe even Saturday and Sunday. Go to a basketball court. You can go to one, in this city, and then go to one in this city on Saturday and Sunday, right? Whatever it is, to have like a weekly pickup basketball game with a bunch of guys. That way you're putting yourself in the situation. You play a 2-hour game so you just understand what is going to happen during that 2-hour block. If you're studying for the MCAT, then take it in the morning, take it at night, take it, in a really loud place, like all these different things. Less to, strengthen those different sides of yourself, more just to be exposed to all of the potential pitfalls as well, just having more iterations, and so that it doesn't become boring. If I ran a marathon around a football field every single week, that would be pretty terrible, right? But that's basically what you're allowing yourself to do if you sit down in your chair at home and study for this MCAT. Instead, if you were to take it and go to different places and face different challenges on top of the actual thing you're doing, it makes it just a little bit more bearable to do this every single week, right? And that's what you need more iterations with the competition itself so that you can be the best at the competition, the best at playing the game, right? Because that's all it is. It's a standard set. You know, if you get really good, the best marathon runners are the ones who have run over 300, 500 marathons in their life because their training is full of marathons, right? And maybe even more than that. Eliud Kipchoge, he probably has run north of like 5,000 marathons in his life. I wouldn't doubt it because however long he's been training, like 15 years, and if he does one every, like just the volume of training, one every like 3 days, let's say, that's 100 a year, 20 years, 15 years. Okay, let's say he's done like 3,000, between 3,000 and 5,000 marathons in his training career. I wouldn't doubt it if those were his numbers. So if that's the case, I'm doing 53, 54 this year. I've got some room to work to get to his level. Now, do I want to get to his level? That's not what I'm pursuing in life. But you get the point. If I want to be at the top of the game, get more iterations, doing the thing at maximum effort. So today I'll walk into the Atlanta Marathon with the confidence that I've done this before, that I've shown up for myself in the past so I can show up today with no fear because there's no necessity for me to walk away with, this massive PR. I don't have anyone breathing down my neck. I'm just going out there to have some fun. And then as well, that this is just one of many. You know, this is not the end all be all. This is not the one, right? This is one of many. And all those things will allow me to approach this marathon in a different way to put down the best results possible. That's all you want to ask from yourself, is to put down the best results possible. Did I try my best? If you can say yes, then you've achieved something that very few people ever will. I'm going to leave it there. Why not us?